The new moral order is already crumbling. Globalism, climate change, alarmism, and cultural self-annihilation have all come under serious challenge. Now that the normies are being affected, this is exactly what I keep saying about making your problems other people's problems. Like New York all of a sudden cares about immigration for some reason. Whereas previously they were like, oh, just let them in. Oh, those poor people. Okay, you take them then. We gotta do something. The new moral order our secularist elites have been busy constructing since the end of the Cold War is collapsing around them, as it should. Over the past 30 years, the values of Judeo-Christian belief that inspired and sustained Western civilization and culture for centuries has been steadily replaced in a moral, cultural, and political revolution of postmodern ascendancy? Now, what's ascending, though? It's been a descent. But the contradictions and implausibilities inherent in this successor creed have been increasingly exposed, and its failure to supply the needs of the people is discrediting it in the popular mind. Yeah, people are fine with it until they suffer the consequences. This new edifice has been built around three principal pillars. First, the ethical primacy of global obligation over national self-interest in economic and geopolitical terms, but most directly and consequently in a rejection of the morality of a national borders and embrace of something like an open door immigration. Yeah, that only works if you're in the third world, I guess. Then it's fine. Ooh, I get access to the first world, but here's where the communists always fuck up. Communism and open borders are incompatible with each other. It has to pretty much be a prison. Like if you have communism, you can't let people leave. Like that's why it was the Russians, it was the Soviets that put up the Berlin Wall. It wasn't the West that put it up to keep the Soviets out. The Soviets put up the wall to prevent their own fucking people from escaping. If you have communism, then the people with money, with intelligence will leave. And then people expecting a free ride will come in. So the money will leave. And people expecting free gibs will increase. It's going to collapse. But that wasn't real communism, guys. This time it was real communism, so open borders would work just fine. No, second, a quasi-biblical belief in climate catastrophism, in which man's essential energy-consuming sinfulness can be expiated only by massive sacrifice of economic progress. By the way, the rich aren't paying for that. So all of these billionaires are still going around on their private jets eating meat while they're telling us to live in grass huts and eat the boogs. Third, a wholesale cultural self-cancellation in which the virtues, values, and historic achievements of traditional civilization are rejected and replaced by cultural hierarchy that inverts old prejudices and obliges a class of white male heterosexuals to acknowledge their history of exploitation and submit to comprehensive socioeconomic reparation. Or they do like what guys like me do for the most part, and we just check out of society. Oh, well, if society is going to treat me like a villain, I'm just going to leave society. Society just views me as a disposable tool to milk. I'll view society the same way. I'll milk society for all it's worth and then discard it when I'm done, just like they're trying to do to me. It's only turnabout's fair play, right? Like with job interviews. I cannot believe employers have the gall to be mad when people like lie on their resume or lie in job interviews when they're also fucking lying like with the job description and in the interview. This fall throughout the West on 3 continents, each of these 3 pillars is crumbling. Yes! And I hope all of them collapse sooner rather than later. That is my wish. It is definitely happening. We see this with the death of ESG. Well, the slow death. It'll take years, but it's starting. I hope it continues. In Lampedusa, the Italian island midway between Europe and Africa, at Eagle Pass, Texas, elsewhere along the visible and increasingly invisible frontiers that separate the global north from the south, the idea of permissive migration in an economically unequal world is being tested to destruction. Lampedusa was inundated last week with another surge of migrants from Africa, larger than the population of the island itself. In Texas, the influx across the border with Mexico became a torrent. Just send them to the sanctuary cities. Problem solved. The demographic tsunami from global south, from the global south, as the North's population shrinks, is in its early stages, and most people can see clearly what happens when leaders insist on a moral code that suggests our obligations to indigent foreigners are as great as those to our own citizens. It won't survive the political backlash now underway in both Europe and America, as even U.S. Democrats and Brussels bureaucrats are slowly starting to grasp. Yeah, look at it this way: when your own government sides with foreign invaders over you, the citizens of the country, your government has committed treason. Like, there is no other way of putting it. When your own government sides with foreign invaders over you, your government is treasonous. The second pillar, the moral imperative of self-abasing action to combat climate change, is falling too, most instantly again in Europe and Airstrip 1, where it has long been the official religion of the secularist priesthood. I'm just surprised people are so fucking stupid enough to fall for this again. We went through this fear-mongering when I was a crotch fruit. Like, oh my God, if this keeps up, my acid rain is going to kill every tree on the planet. Oh, we'll be underwater by the year 2000. Oh, why are people so fucking stupid? They keep falling for the same fear-mongering. I mean, last week, Britain's notionally conservative government took a small but symbolic important step in climate apostasy, announcing some sensible tweaks to the program of regulatory decarbonization mandates, such as pushing back a few years and then phasing out of new gasoline-powered cars. The move was precipitated by high and rising costs to ordinary citizens of these measures that didn't actually involve yet a formal retreat from the ambitious goal of making the country carbon neutral by 2050. But the howls from almost the entire establishment were an encouraging sign that the priesthood knows its days are numbered. Yeah, and as Arch said in another video he did, imagine how they're going to behave once they're losing. Because all the horrible stuff they've been doing to us is when they think they're winning. Imagine how the cornered rat is going to lash out when it's losing. There's an air of surrealism about the climate change debate in Airstrip 1 in much of Europe. Airstrip 1 has dramatically reduced carbon emissions over the past 30 years thanks to significant part in technological innovation. Its emissions per capita is down to where they were in the mid-19th century. The British government could mandate tomorrow the elimination of all carbon emissions and return to agrarian subsistence. And given the massive and rapidly rising levels of emissions from China, India, and elsewhere, that wouldn't make the slightest difference to the climate. I know, right? It's just so funny watching them do that, though. The government did a good move pushing back some of these mandates because I think the conservative side sees the pendulum is starting to swing back, and they can't get rid of it right away, but they could keep kicking the can down the road until they finally kick it into a trash can. Like, that's their goal. They're gonna get rid of it in the long run, but for now, they're just going to keep extending the deadline further and further into the future to buy time. It's a common strategy. Everyone knows what they're doing. This realization of the folly and immorality of the moral imperative is gradually seeping through elsewhere in Europe. Other governments are confronting the disastrous consequences of their monomaniacal pursuit of carbon elimination, embracing elements of the modern heresy. Oh, yeah. Is that Germany going back to coal? Yeah. The third pillar, cultural self-annihilation, is also wobbling. Yeah, there's finally some resistance. Now that most normies have finally experienced some downsides to this, they're starting to wake up. Like, maybe this wasn't a good idea. The most interesting evidence of this is an electoral debate underway in Straya. The left-wing government there, eager to impress the world with its moral bona fides, has called for a reform of the constitution designed to redress the grievances of the Aboriginal population. Called the Voice to Parliament, the measure would create a constitutional body that Parliament would be required to consult on all legislative and other matters relating to Indigenous peoples. The referendum was expected to approve this change. The referendum that was expected to approve this change takes place next month, but the campaign has run into fierce opposition. Everyone thought Brexit was going to fail too, remember? The most recent poll suggests Australians will reject the move by a large majority. It seems they, like many of us in the West, have had enough of our leaders' insistence on dividing us by race and other attributes rather than uniting us around our common national identity. Yeah, that's been my problem from the start. They focus so much on what makes us different that what makes us the same doesn't matter anymore. That's forgotten. The pillars are crumbling. The fight will go on. We don't know what will replace this new moral order, but we can at least hope for a restoration to the traditional values that, ironically, through economic and cultural enrichment and political and civil liberation, permitted the West to indulge in this orgy of self-immolation in the first place. Yeah, I hope that whatever replaces this system will have safeguards in place to prevent anything like woke shit from ever spawning again.